What is the most sinful thing you've done that you are sure will bar you from heaven forever? I was a younger guy then and worked for a bus company as a tour guide for organized trips. Once, we had to pick up people in 3 cities before starting the trip to Louisiana from Canada. The driver and I made a few voyages together and got along quite well. The first pickup was a sleepover, and we picked up about 10 people. The driver and I met these nice women at the bar and realized they were with our group. They introduced themselves as sisters. We continued talking. It's starting to get late, and since we needed to leave early the next day, we all called it a night. Being gentlemen and all, we escorted them each to their room. Hugs and cheek kisses. It was all very sweet. Now I'm in my room, still dressed, when there is a knock at the door. It was the youngest of the 2 sisters who claimed she wasn't sleepy after all and wanted to talk to me more because she claimed we were spirited souls. Not 5 minutes later, we were both nude, kissing heavily, and she tossed me on the bed and took the initiative to do the lovemaking herself. First time ever, it was a definite turn on for me. The next morning, we went down to find the driver with the other sister talking to the other passengers. The driver kept winking at me, and I understood somehow that he also had had a marvelous night. Shortly after, we left for the other cities. We were going away for 28 days. So, she would come knocking on my door every night without the passengers knowing. And she taught me stuff about lovemaking that I didn't even fantasize about yet. She was really good. But she made me promise early on that it would not be anything serious. That it was just intercourse and that after the trip, it would be over. That part was very clear, and she mentioned it very often. Hey, I had no problem with that because I was getting some, and it was even better than with my wife. Shortly after the trip, the driver told me he was hitting it off with the other sister and that she was hot. They were not the most attractive of women, but they were calm and sure of themselves. Which for me was totally new for a woman. All the women of my life until then seemed to blend. About 10 days before the end of our trip, while having supper, just the 4 of us. The conversation switched between the couples. While glancing at me occasionally, the one with my driver talked only to me, and the other was talking solely with the driver. That night we switched sisters. For me, that was the most incredible thing that could happen. The new one was not as talented as the original, but like I said, she was hot. Just looking at her, for me, was more than okay. So the trip ended. Huge hugs and kisses and a reminder that what happened has ended, and they made us promise that we would never look them up, ever. That made us believe they were married and did not want any problems. It was fine by us. My now ex-wife, who was not too happy with me traveling alone, gave me an ultimatum. My job or her. I should have stood my ground then, but I told my company I was giving them a 2 weeks notice. They proposed a short trip of 3 days weekend to a well-known Canadian city with a group of older people. The driver was the same as the trip to Louisiana. It was a great time. On the last day, a Sunday, a passenger had a heart attack, as we were going to mass in a well-known church in that area. So we decided I would be dropped off at the nearest hospital with his wife while the driver went to mass with the rest of the group. Once there, I see a security officer approaching the bus with a wheelchair and a nun behind him. Near the bus, the nun turned around and ran inside the hospital. Shortly after, once the gentleman was in the emergency room and I was with his wife in the waiting area, I noticed a door slightly ajar with a hand gesturing to someone to come inside. Since I didn't see anybody nearby, I understood it might be for me. So I excused myself, and approached the door. My heart skipped a few beats because, inside the room, was the hottest of the 2 sisters. She kept asking me how I found out where they were and all kinds of questions my head could not grasp because I was in shock. The only thing I could think about was going to Hades as I realized I had just had the best intercourse of my life with 2 nuns. A lot is still confusing in my mind after that. But I remember telling the driver on our way back, and he did not believe me. Though, later we confirmed that they were both nuns the whole time. I still get a stiffy whenever I see a nun